As we continue in our study of rewards that God gives us. We're in Mark 9, verse 41 tonight. And in recent weeks, we've talked about what it truly means to receive rewards, both spiritual and physical rewards from God. And a couple weeks ago, we looked specifically at God's rewards. And then rewards in this life last week that we might receive as we looked at Psalm 37:25. And tonight we are looking in the Gospels at how Jesus even promised us rewards while he was here on earth. And before we read tonight's text, I have a story for you from Reader's Digest. It says that one morning, this man, Marion Gilbert, wrote, he said, one morning I opened the door to get the newspaper and was surprised to see a strange little dog with our paper in his mouth. Delighted with this unexpected delivery service, I fed him some treats. The following morning, I opened my door and was horrified to see the same dog sitting in front of our door, wagging his tail, surrounded by 8 newspapers. I spent the rest of that morning returning the papers to their owners. And so this little dog, brought the paper to the house, and it sounded like it wasn't even his dog. And the dog got rewarded. And so what did the dog do? It performed again, and even better, because it knew what kind of rewards it was going to receive. And so that dog did something and then was rewarded for it. And so the dog did something, the same thing, just on a bigger scale, so that it would get more rewards. And generally that's how rewards work when we think about them in that regard. But when it comes to the spiritual rewards that God promises us, or even here as in Mark chapter 9, as we see that Jesus promises rewards, it's not the same. It's not the same situation. We don't do things to get rewarded from God. His rewards are completely His prerogative, and it's completely up to His wisdom as how to give them. So let's look at Mark chapter 9 for just a moment, and it's in verse 41 that we're reading, and I'm reading from the New King James Version tonight. It says, "For whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, assuredly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward." And so Jesus is promising us 2 things here. First off, he's promising us that we will receive rewards from God, and these rewards seem to point to spiritual rewards in heaven. But first off, we see that Jesus is promising, hey, you're going to receive spiritual rewards. But secondly, that we can't lose those rewards once we've received them, I guess is the best way to put it. And so Jesus right here plainly taught about rewards for Christians. I mean, it's not, it's not ambiguous. It's not difficult to understand. Jesus tells us right here that there are rewards that he is promising to us. But the thing we have to understand is that the rewards are not the motivation for us to love or obey God. The reason that dog loved that man is because when he brought the newspaper to the house, the dog got rewarded. So he's going to love him a whole lot more the next day when he comes and drops off 8 newspapers on the porch that next morning. And so, when we think about the rewards that God gives us, we understand that they are not the motivation for us to love him or to obey him. We don't read the Bible and it says, "Thou shalt not murder." We don't, and we realize that if we follow God's commands, all of a sudden, he's going to bless us. We don't follow the commands to receive the rewards. We obey him out of a heart that is devoted to him. We serve him because he deserves our love. We serve him because he deserves our service, because he is the God of the universe, and for no other reason. Not because of rewards, not to make us look good, not for anything. We ought to serve him simply because he deserves it. Just because he is deserving of our love, he is worthy of our worship, and we worship him through service as well as any other thing. But see, God, does not owe us anything. That's something hard for a lot of folks to realize today, is that they're not owed anything. You know, I mean, you have to work for what you want and what you need. You know, you can't sit back and just expect it all to just sort of fall into your lap. So it just doesn't happen. But it's the same thing with God. God doesn't owe us anything, just like we're not owed anything else, but God doesn't owe us a thing. If anything, who owes who? We owe Him. I see a lot of heads shaking. Yeah, I'm in debt beyond what I can pay to God because of His salvation, because of His grace, because of His forgiveness. You know, if anybody owes anything to anybody, we ought to be throwing rewards as best we could towards God. But we know that we can't. But we know that God does not owe us anything. And these rewards that He promises us, either here on earth or in heaven, these rewards are an added bonus, if you want to look at it that way. They're just more evidence of God's love, His graciousness, His grace, His mercy. These are like the cherry on top, so to speak, when it comes to all the other things that He does for us. You know, when I first started working 22 years ago, day after I turned 16, I had a job at Sawmills Hardware. Mom and Dad said, "You get your license and you want a car to drive, we'll let you drive our truck, but we ain't paying the insurance and we ain't paying the fuel. You're going to have to drive, work so you can afford that sort of stuff. You want to go out on a date with your girlfriend, you're going to have money. We ain't fronting the money." And so Mom and Dad instilled in us a work ethic. And so went to work the day after I turned 16. And in the course of that, I started in February, come 4th of July time frame. Ray Wilson, very godly man that I respected more than about anybody else in this world a lot of times. He was a good businessman, but he came to us one day around the 4th of July and said, he said, "Got a bonus for you." He said, "You've done a good job for us. We appreciate the hard work that you've done, but here's your bonus." And it was probably like $100 or something like that. But to me, it was just awesome because here I was, I was making $4.25 an hour, and I was excited about that, And so here he is giving me a bonus for working hard. And so I thought, oh, that's good. And so worked about another 6 months, and then, lo and behold, Christmas time comes around. And, if you do a good job and the boss pays attention, they'll give you a bonus. And that's what they did at Christmas time as well. And, I'm working part-time after school and on Saturdays and stuff. And so what he was giving me wasn't a whole lot of money because, I lived at home and all that. But he still was giving me a bonus for what I had done. But one of the things my parents were quick to tell me when I come home flashing, a check saying, "Hey, look what I got today. It ain't even payday and look what I got." They basically said, "Well, you need to understand that that's a bonus. Do not expect that again. If you get it, that's great. If you get a bonus again, that's great. But do not expect it every Christmas. Do not expect it every 4th of July or whatever the case may be." And that really sunk in with me. It really, and so I did a good job for them all the time, not because I might get a bonus once or twice a year, but I did a good job for them because that's what I was taught to do. And so if I got the bonus, that was this added cherry on top. That's a nice thing to get. And when we look at the rewards that God gives to us, it's that same bonus mentality. That's on top of everything else that He gives us. We could look at our salvation and God's provision as our hourly wage, if you wanted to. That is what God pays us, so to speak. He's given us our salvation. He's provided for us. He's done all of these things, grace, mercy, all these things. And then if He wants to give us a reward, it's like giving us a bonus check. Whatever rewards He gives, whether they're here on earth or whether they're in heaven waiting for us when we get there, they are a bonus from Him. And so we ought to look at them in that regard. And when it comes to the scriptures and what we read about when it comes to these rewards, we don't serve God in order to be noticed by others. Some people do. Some people want to hold certain positions in the church. Some people want to do certain things just so they can be noticed by other people, not because they're wanting to serve God, but because they want the attention of man. Having been in church for 38 years and been a minister in some form or fashion for close to 14 years now, I've seen it before. I've seen where, it's just people are serving for themselves and so that other people will see them. But see, Jesus criticized the Pharisees, who were the spiritual leaders of his day. He criticized them for doing things like this, so that people would see. The praying aloud and very boisterously, and very, and giving in such a manner that others would see, and things like that. Jesus criticized them for the way that they tried to worship God in that way. But he also warned his disciples not to do the same thing. That if you're going to serve with a genuine and pure heart, that you're serving God because you want to, not for any other reason. Because if you do it for any other reason, you're missing it. You're missing what God has for you and what he wants for you. Matthew chapter 6 says this, and this was Jesus. He says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven." And so Jesus is basically saying, look, if you are going to serve, and in our context, if you're going to serve in the church, and you're going to do so that other people see you, then that is your reward. Don't expect something when you get to heaven. Don't expect that bonus, because you've gotten your reward. And your reward was the applause of men rather than the applause of God. And so later in this same chapter, Jesus even continues and instructs people to give your finances secretly in the same way. Not to do it very boastfully, not to do it very proudly, or so that other people know. Don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing, type of thing. And if we do this, if we make sure that we are giving in a way that it's not a matter of other people seeing what we give or how much we give, then when we do that, we're focused on pleasing God and not what people think about us. And that's the important thing, is that it's, don't take this the wrong way, but I can care less what you think about me, as long as my Lord is the one that, is concerned with my heart and my condition and what I'm doing. I know that sounds sort of rough, but that should be our focus. That should be our agenda. A couple of years ago, I can't remember, I think it was a Sunday night that we were talking about giving or something along those lines. And I made the joke that, talking about this sort of thing, that when you give, you're not supposed to take your offering envelope and be like, oh, I got to put my offering envelope in the plate when it comes around, or oh, wait, I need it here, let me, waving it so that everybody sees it, and that's the mentality that Jesus is saying. Even when on Sunday mornings, I'm sitting up here on the front row by myself every Sunday. I don't know if Wayne's not in here. Wayne or one of the guys, Sean, one of them that comes through here a lot of times. I don't know if any of the ushers ever noticed, but when I put my offering in, I always put my offering in just like that, because it's nobody's business when they go through to see what my offering is, because my offering, well, mine and Misty's offering, is between me and the Lord. And that's the way we ought to approach it. That we know that we're giving biblically, like we've been talking about, according to those guidelines that we talked about this past Sunday. But as long as we're doing that and we're giving it from a pure heart, then we don't want anybody to see it. We don't want anybody to see, and if we don't use an envelope, we're not dropping wads of cash into the envelope, into the plate as it comes around from, head high, so everybody would see it. That's not what we need to do. What we need to do is make sure that we're focused on pleasing God and not worry about man. Man will take care of himself. We want to make sure that what we're doing is pleasing to God. And so the Pharisees, as we read about in the Gospels, they were very interested in looking good to the world around them. That's what they wanted. They wanted eyes on them, and they wanted to be looked upon as being super spiritual. That's what they wanted. And Jesus called them out on their hypocrisy, because they may look super spiritual, but they were whitewashed tombs on the inside, so to speak, as Jesus would put it. And so Jesus taught that the Pharisees, their practice of bringing attention to their good works and to their prayers was not pleasing to God. That was, if you're doing it so that other people can see you, if you're doing your good works, if you are doing your prayers or doing your offering or your giving in such a way that it's for other people to see, then who are you worshiping? You're worshiping yourself rather than God. You're worshiping yourself, saying, look at me, eyes on me, focus what I'm doing, and not on God. Don't look at what God's doing. And so it's important that we see what Jesus is talking about there, because an attitude of humility in our life will help us to avoid seeking those rewards for the sake of a reward. And so if we will remain humble before the Lord, what will happen is we'll see that we are avoiding that. We're avoiding pursuing those rewards or simply because we want the reward. Turn in your Bibles to Matthew 16 real quick, and we're almost done with our devotional tonight. Matthew chapter 16, and this is verses 24 through 27. Matthew 16, verses 24 through 27, and this will help us understand that just a little bit more. And I'm reading from the NIV in this set of scripture. It says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me.'" You know, if you deny yourself, that's a true act of humility, because all of a sudden you have from the very get-go said, it's about somebody else, it's not about me. I'm denying myself. It's about God. But look at what it says there. It says in verse 25, it says, "For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done. I tell you the truth, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." And so what we read here is just a little snippet from the Gospels that helps us to understand that we're not to pursue the reward just so that we can get a reward, but instead we ought to be humble. We ought to deny ourselves and follow Christ, that we ought to pick up his cross and follow him, and set aside those things that would cause us to not be focused on him and instead be focused on ourselves. And so it's important that we pursue a life of humility, because God asks us to obey his word, and the rewards for doing so are up to God. Just because you obey God in one certain area of your life and he rewards you does not mean that he will necessarily reward someone in like and kind fashion simply because they obey God in the exact same area of life. What we understand is that rewards are God's prerogative, that it is sort of like his decision to heal. It's according to his will and how he chooses to do so. And as we've said for the past several weeks, when God rewards us for whatever and in whatever way, when he rewards us, we have to remember that his assignment of rewards is always just. It's always right. It's always true. So there's never a doubt, and should never be a doubt in our mind saying, well, God doesn't love me like he loves him or her because he rewarded them, but he didn't reward me the same way. We can't look at it that way, because God's rewards are based solely on his prerogative and his understanding of who we are on a more intimate level than we understand ourselves. And in that regard, when he knows us so well, he knows how he can reward us, and whether we would be better served for a reward in heaven versus a reward on earth, or a reward of this type or that type. So the best rewards that we could ever get are not received during our life here on earth. And that's kind of hard for us to swallow, so to speak, right here, because that means that our greatest rewards are in heaven. And, if you think about it, it's sort of like a 401k in heaven, or an IRA in heaven, if you want to look at it in that regard. Right now, I'm 38 years old, and when it comes to retirement, me and my wife, we have a certain retirement plan as far as trying to set money back for retirement. And right now, what that means is that we either have that money now and we spend it now, more than likely, or we set it back in an account that we can't touch, that 401, IRA, whatever, all that stuff. And so when we get to retirement, we will have that money available so that we can, spend it on, day-to-day needs, medicine, doctor's visits, all those fun things. And, well, they're not fun, but, you get the picture. And so when we look at the way God rewards us, He can reward us here on earth. And we get it right now in the temporary, in the momentary. And, yeah, it might be really nice to have that reward right now, and we get it, and it just seems so good. But it's going to pass away. It's going to go the way of dust and dirt, and eventually it's going to be eaten by moths, it's going to decay, it's going to whatever. But the rewards that are best are those that are put into our spiritual 401k in heaven. Because when we retire from this earth and we get to heaven, those rewards, they ain't going to run out. They are for eternity. And so, personally, I'm not one to generally think towards wanting to. I'm not thinking towards my retirement that much right now, because I'm thinking, I still got 30 years of work ahead of me. So it's going to be a long time till I get there. But when I think about my spiritual rewards, I would just soon have them all there. I would just soon God, keep from bankrupting me here, Lord, so that I can be blessed in heaven, because I'm going to be there for eternity. I'm only going to be here for, hopefully another 50 years or so. And if that's it, that's it. But I don't want my rewards now where they're going to be for a few years, or maybe a decade at best, and then they're gone. I would much rather my rewards, I would much rather God stockpile my rewards in the corner of my place in heaven and say, there you go, Nicholas. This is for what you did according to what I gave you. With your finances, with the gospel, with your service, with everything that I gave you. That's what God is going to base our. That's what He's going to base our some of our rewards on. Is what we did with what He gave us in this life. What did you do with the talents and abilities? What did you do with the finances I gave you? And all of this. And He's going to say, when we stand at the judgment seat of Christ, He's going to say, what did you do with what I gave you? And we can give all of the explanations for why we didn't do certain things, but they're not going to hold water. Well, I didn't give, Lord, like we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. I didn't give, Lord, because I didn't feel like I could give. Well, don't hold water to the Lord, because we need to make sure that we give according to biblical standards. Well, why didn't you serve me in a greater capacity? Well, Lord, I was busy. Or I just didn't want to do this, or I didn't do that. Again, it's not going to hold water. And so when we stand before the Lord, we have to understand that He's going to judge us. And as it talks about in the text just before the talking of about the judgment seat of Christ, it's talking about how what we do for the wrong motives, like we've talked about tonight, are all of those things, those excuses, they're all going to burn up. They're not going to be any good. They're going to burn up like wheat and chaff. And so instead, we want things that last for us into eternity, that will be those spiritual rewards that God has for us stockpiled there, that will never rust or never decay. And so that is tonight's devotional.